Investigators expected to find the man guilty of the brazen assault on Melissa Etzler lurking in the shadows. They figured any persons of interest in 19-year-old Jessie Blodgett's murder 12 miles away to be hiding underground. Instead, Daniel Bartelt was basking in the spotlight, even landing the lead role in Bye Bye Birdie just before both attacks.
Dan was one of the most intelligent people that I've ever interviewed. He had a sense about him that was bad.
Dan made your skin crawl.
Yes.
Especially when just one day after Jessie's murder, before the forensics had even come back, this trained actor flubbed one of his lines.
He said that he believed that Jessie had been raped and murdered.
And you didn't even know she had been raped yet.
We had no indications of her being raped.
Only the killer could know that. So while Dan sits in jail for that assault on the girl in the park, detectives covering that case share what they know with detectives investigating Jessie's murder.
I was doing search warrants on Dan's computer, and in the computer there was a lot of bondage pornography. There was a lot of, I don't know how you describe it, it's dark stuff.
Including one Wikipedia search on spree killers and several other searches for serial killers. It didn't end there.
We actually had searches for pornographic snuff films that actually seemed to match the series of events that occurred in Jessie's room. In the movie, after strangling her, he washes her. One of the things that Mrs. Blodgett had made note of was how Jessie was placed back in her bed, covered up, and that her hair was wet.
Just an eerie coincidence? Detectives were about to ask the suspect themselves.
And what I want to talk to you about, Jessie Blodgett, and to understand that you are friends with her, okay?
This time, Dan is a little more careful not to incriminate himself.
What do you think happened to Jessie?
I have no idea.
Dan admits that he'd reconnected with his one-time girlfriend that summer and had been at Jessie's house a lot in the weeks before her murder. He even says he had good reason to hide that fact, but it wasn't because of anything nefarious.
Started kissing on the couch and she'd asked if I wanted to go up with her.
He said that they had a romantic relationship, but he hadn't made it public because he was dating someone else.
But detectives are suspicious.
The entire time I talked to him, he made it look like he was crying, but I didn't see him shed a tear.
It's one of those kind of cries.
Right.
A lot of noise and no tears.
Right.
As for Dan's whereabouts on the day of Jessie's murder, he says he was driving around in his parents' van, pretending to be at work.
He said that he had left the house and he had gone to a couple of different parks, ending up at Woodlawn Park in the city. What time did you end up there?
10 or so. What were you doing about Woodlawn?
Reading, trying to write.
An airtight alibi, claims Dan. But then, get this, when it comes to what Dan was, quote, trying to write, he tells detectives it's a series of stories about a young girl, not unlike Jessie, who would eventually be murdered.
The main character's name is Jessica.
So he admits to killing off the fictional character Jessica, not so much for Jessie Blodgett.
Can you help us out on it? Give them some closure?
He denied any involvement.
And as detectives continue to press, Dan's tone gets suddenly less teary.
Making me very uncomfortable. Why is that? Because of what you're trying to insinuate. And what's that?
Dan uses his right to remain silent on that question, and he won't have much to say beyond that either.
Let's see how this is helpful. If we're going to talk more, I might have a lawyer.
And with that statement, it was interview over. Dan had confessed to nothing. As for his alibi,
Dan said that he was at the Woodlawn Park. So they get video, sure enough, there's Dan. He was there that morning that Jessie was killed.
That's him in the red shorts, definitely not at the scene of the crime. So then, had police been too quick to pin a murder on an easy suspect? One who had already confessed to another crime? Jessie's own parents thought so. Especially because Daniel Bartelt spent hours grieving with them after Jessie's murder. In fact, when the police called
Dan was at our house.
was crying over Jessie.
Yeah, and sharing memories with us. I hugged Dan several times. We were telling the police it wasn't him and he was a good guy.
But Jessie's parents are wrong, fooled by his act. As it turns out, Dan's own alibi would also be his undoing. Back at that park, police uncovered the dark side of Daniel Bartelt.
They go take all the trash out of the trash bins at Woodlawn Park. They find the cereal box. Inside the cereal box is ball gag, ligatures, alcohol wipes.
And the rope found in the trash lines up perfectly with the ligature marks on Jessie's neck. Then when detectives search Dan's house, they find the exact same rope in his garage. Plus, remember that tape investigators found on Dan's vents that matched tape he dropped during Melissa's assault? Incredibly, a full week after Jessie Blodgett's murder, investigators taking a second look at the scene find the exact same tape under her bed.
His fingerprints were on that.
Pretty incredible.
Yes.
And based on the evidence, investigators believe they know exactly why the tape was there.
What did he use this tape for?
He hog-tied Jess. He gag-balled her, and he taped her so the gag ball wouldn't come out.
Detectives also find both Jessie and Dan's DNA on those ligatures, and Dan's DNA under Jessie's fingernails. And when it comes to that detail Dan let slip in his first interview,
And did he rape her?
We found DNA that indicated that he assaulted her.
after that, it was hard for anyone to deny that Daniel Bartelt they thought they knew was something else entirely.
Dan's a chameleon. He is able to present himself to the world in a very different light than the way he actually is.
Good qualities for an actor, lethal for a killer.
You want to believe the best about people. You want to believe the best about people that you call your friends. It's to, see your friends not be evil.
Even without a confession, Dan Bartelt is charged with first-degree intentional homicide of his old friend Jessie. But there's still one giant question left hanging. Why? Dan would get one more chance to say his piece in court, but would he finally come clean? Or would it be the ultimate slap in the face to a family already in mourning?
Mr. Bartelt, before I sentence you, anything you want to say on your behalf?
I do.
Coming up,
These shackles that I'm put in don't make me guilty.
Daniel Bartelt's last stand.
The only reason that I went to trial at all is because
Personally, don't like labels, but I think he's a sociopath. I think he has no empathy. I think he's brilliant and talented, like many sociopaths, and they're calculating. They learn how to fit in and blend.